Great. Good to see you again, Jeff.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, excellent. Good. It's May 1st. Oh, welcome to May. There we are. There
Yeah,
we
well,
are.
I love May. It's the true beginning of golfing season.
Oh, no, not one of those.
Yep.
Jeez. Oh, okay. I'm not even going to go down there. I'm not touching that line whatsoever. So, mainly because I don't play golf. B, I'm impossible at playing golf when I have tried it. And C, I don't like golf. But, I'm giving you my 3 points on golf. We can move on. We can move on. Especially as I'm getting ready to go away at the end of May anyway. So into an area of the world where the morning temperature starts at 30 and then goes up from there. So that's my month end as I move towards springtime here and something a little hotter in the destination. So we were just before we started, we were just talking about social capital and some work that you've been doing. So why don't you tell us more about it?
Absolutely. I've had the pleasure of working with the Institute for Social Capital, which has been around for about 20 years, and it's the world leading organization in or business in defining social capital and understanding what social capital is, its usefulness and its employment, the positive, the negative effects side of it, etc. And uh, my company and theirs have been working in the background for the past, I don't know, probably a couple of months, putting together a course for emergency managers and people working in the business continuity field in the corporate world to help better understand the value of social capital in the execution of their role and the execution of their tasks. And really, social capital is one of those concepts that comes from the social sciences that has about 140 different definitions, depending on whose research you're going to read or what perspective or lens or theoretical framework you're using. It's people say, well, define social capital. Well, great. How much time do you have? What do you do? And why do you need to know this definition? Those are all, and people goes, no, no, just tell me the given definition. Well, I'm like, if there's anything that describes heterogeneity in research better than defining a social construct is social capital. I mean, but in reality, it is the value embedded in relationships and knowledge that can be leveraged by individuals for other purposes. It's a really broad definition, and the easiest way to define it is to probably example. So your social capital it can be described in one way as your state of your relationships. So social capital is a measure of the strength of relationships that you have with other human beings. And social capital is one capital that we argue needs to exist to permit the flow of other capitals.
Mhm.
So financial capital, human capital being education, physical capital being goods and services,
Mhm.
flow along relationships that are established through social capital. It's often been called both the lubricant and the glue that holds organizations and societies together. So it's basically built on two pillars. One is trust, and the other is a norm of reciprocity. So it basically means you and I have a trusting friendship. I trust you, you trust me. I make the assumption, I think, rightfully, that there is a norm of reciprocity, that if I was to do something from you, I can reasonably understand that that favor would be returned.
Mhm.
And because I know you,
Mhm.
if I had to loan you something of mine, be
Mhm.
it my education, my human capital, financial capital,
Mhm.
or be it a physical good, you wanted to borrow my generator, you wanted to borrow my shovel, the fact that we have an established relationship
Mhm.
makes that
Mhm.
flow of the physical good that
Mhm.
much more possible. I actually wrote something on LinkedIn this morning about the value of social capital for my company. And it was just explaining that if a stranger shows up on your front door and asks to borrow your lawnmower, and you've never seen this individual before, the
Mhm,
odds of that happening are fairly slim. However, if the neighbor from
mhm,
across the street comes over,
mhm,
somebody with you have a reasonable sense of familiarity, you might know their first name, you may waved at them, whatever it may be, you have a sense of trust with that individual, familiarity, and you're more than likely to
mhm,
lend them the lawnmower. And
mhm,
when you lend them the lawnmower, you can make the reasonable assumption that when you go back across the street in 2 months and you ask for their special aerating tool for the lawn, that that norm of reciprocity will exist and
mhm,
that they will trade it back. So we use this in the research that I do. It is literally the theoretical frame for everything
mhm,
for the research that I employ about power of human
mhm,
relationships and the power of connectedness. Because really, when we look at social capital, it can also be described as individual and collective. So an individual has social capital and there's collected social capital. So
mhm,
the Logistics Institute has its own store and flow of social capital, as
mhm,
do you and I. So,
mhm, mhm,
and it really breaking down into your individuals and collective organizations have a predisposition.
mhm,
So your personality, who you are, you have a
mhm.
predisposition and you have a connectedness.
Yeah,
So your predisposition is what you bring to the table, your
yeah,
level of
yeah,
connectedness.
yeah,
As it increases, you have a higher degree of predisposition.
yeah. That's fascinating, and it provides for me, and I hope for others, a foundation, theoretical. Well, it's beyond theoretical because there are pragmatics and practicalities involved in this. Because relationships are not theoretical, relationships are pragmatic,
Yeah.
whether you like them or don't like them, whether
And they
you're
ebb and flow.
and they ebb and flow. But it is a take on supply chain logistics, global supply chain and global logistics that we take at the Institute, and that is we focus on stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah.
Now, this is a very old notion. It's not old so much as it dates back to Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker wrote an absolutely fantastic book on post-capitalist Western economies, and you'd think this was in the 40s and 50s. This was the fear of communism kind of era in which he wrote. Absolutely brilliant man, and it's the basis of what we talk about in our programs, and in particular in my own writing around stakeholder capitalism. It's to recognize that supply chains, global supply chains, with logistics embedded in it, you can't have one without the other. Really is a business ecosystem, and therefore that ecosystem has a symbiotic relationship among all the different parts, and it's focusing on the symbiosis. Now, again, my analogy is different from what you're talking about, but they're comparable. You can't look at a garden without noticing that there's a symbiotic relationship among all of the factors that make up the garden, and one cannot survive without the other. One part cannot survive without the other. There's a whole area around nourishment and sustainability, if you want to use that term. While that is a more biological analogy, stakeholder capitalism really recognizes that no business, no industry is isolated from any other. And it's a very simple thing. Again, I may have mentioned this at a different time, where you have a company that is located in a neighborhood. I'm sorry, I don't care who you are. We are all located in neighborhoods. I mean, there's the grocery store up the street, there's the gas station down the roads, there's the school around the corner, there are the residential houses in and around us. All of those are part and parcel of the stakeholder community that are critical to the not just the support for the success of the company, but for its actual success. I mean, if you didn't have a place where there are restaurants, for example, and you have 400 workers, and you didn't provide a place for them to eat or bring their own food or go out for food, how do you actually attract 400 workers to remain working with you? You need those restaurants. And by the way, it's reciprocity, as you just used that term. Those restaurants need you. If they
Oh
didn't,
yeah. Yeah.
if they didn't have 400 people who potentially go and buy coffee, they can't survive
No.
financially or otherwise. So all of which, if we want to use the capitalist term, all of which is about who makes money and how do we make money and how do we do so jointly. And the success of the mom and pop operation down the road is integral to the success of your operation that allows you to hire the 400 people who can then, go and buy a sandwich or a candy bar. Um,
Yeah.
and while it's as simple as that, and it is, it's that simple, there's an integral complexity to all that because we can assume, and we can assume that, oh, this all works together, it's nice, and so on and so forth. Well, wait a minute, I think we need to examine what the level of trust is. And the reciprocity involved in that, and the fact that we actually need each other. So from a business point of view, it's trying to get people to go from individual inside the four walls, recognizing that even inside the four walls, there's a cluster of operations. And then you go outside the four walls and you realize that you're in a stakeholder community that is both local and international, right?
Oh yeah. It's
And
it's it's the environment, and I think the way we refer to it is you create an enabling environment,
yes,
foster that to permit the
yes,
fostering that
yeah,
the growth of social capital. So
yeah,
that enabling environment is the role of the organization.
yeah,
And it's the role of the community group, whatever it may be. But it's the same as the garden. The gardener can't make the plant grow,
no,
but the gardener is responsible for setting the conditions for
yes,
growth to
yes,
happen.
yes,
That social capital by putting the
yes,
necessary pieces
yes,
together in
yes,
a state where they can work together and fostering the conditions for the growth of social capital. So whether you're looking at integrating your purchasing to your
yes,
warehousing to
yes,
your last mile logistics, when those parts of the sequential operation are part of a team and have a reasonably decent level of social capital,
mhm,
research into operations management tells
mhm,
us that that
mhm,
is a more efficient and effective
yes,
organization,
yes,
right?
yes,
You have your favorite restaurant.
yes.
It's not just because the restaurant has great calzone, and they
Well
very
done.
well may,
It does. It does.
right? But
Yes.
it's also the person who serves you the calzone,
Yes.
how you feel in the environment,
Yes.
how you're treated in the
Yes.
environment, and how you're welcomed.
Yes.
That's all part of
Yeah.
social capital. That's
Yes.
all part of building
Yes.
a relationship. So when we
Yes.
work, same thing along the supply chain, when you have all of these stakeholders that
Mhm,
necessarily may look like competition. And this was a great
mhm,
example that came out of a study I did in southwestern Ontario. Can't name
mhm.
the city, but southwestern Ontario. And it was about electricians. And it was the fact to sit down with the electricians and realize that they're not actually in competition with each other,
Oh,
that they're part of a system that
yes.
provides an overall service,
Mhm,
and that there's enough work for everybody there, basic macroeconomics and the rules of entry and exit from a marketplace. There's enough work for everybody, and when they work together, and build a relationship and hand off work between each other when it exceeds their capacity, the system itself grows. The system becomes more valuable. And it's the same in a logistics framework when you talk about first and second tier suppliers and your suppliers that form part of your risk profile in your supply chain risk management.
Yes. Yes.
Building a relationship with, yes, I get my finished good from my supplier,
Yeah.
but that supplier constructs that from a series of inputs.
Yes.
I'm going to build some form of relationship with the provisioners of those inputs and build that relationship so I understand it better and there's a better sense of connectedness. We are all habitually patternized. I know it's a bad word to use, but we're patternized individuals in that I go to places that I'm comfortable with where I feel welcome.
Yes.
Right? Prime example is I'm with a certain insurance company that I won't name, whose premiums are about 12% higher than the market average.
Yep.
However, the people at the broker's office have served my family well in two separate floods in a house that we used to own.
Yep.
To me, there is a tangible financial capital value to that social relationship that I'm willing to pay a premium for.
Yeah.
When organizations understand the power of that relationship, you start commanding, well, let's just throw the capitalist in there. I can command higher value or higher cost or higher pricing when I provide better service and build a relationship with you. Because we build relationships first. We buy whatever it is from people we trust.
Yes.
That's just what humans do.
Yes. Yes. And you know, it's integral to working out of assumptions. Again, and getting back to something I was thinking about recently. And you used the phrase reasonable assumptions. And part of the assumption mentality, because that's basically what it is. And everybody thinks that assumptions are automatically wrong. We need our assumptions. We need to work with people that we are comfortable with. So for me, another way of understanding an assumption is there are two ways. One is the negatives. We cocoon ourselves from reality. That's one. The other is we deal with our comfort zone. You know, life needs comfort. I don't care who you are. We need to know where the water is coming from and that the water still runs. We need to know that the hydro is still working and we get electricity. And we need to assume that it's going to work that way. Recognizing that there are exogenous situations that will cause interruptions. Right. Okay. Recognizing that the exogenous is not normative. It's the abnormal or not normal, right? Having said that, you know, I wrote down the word competition or competitors. You know, there are very famous heads of mega companies going back to the past, Henry Ford, you know, all of the other ones, Mellon and others, even you know, that whole 19th century emerging capitalist industrial complex here in North America in particular. And they would categorically say you don't eliminate your competitor. You actually need your competitor because it makes you better at what you do. All right. You don't want your competitor to go out of business. Because if your competitor goes out of business, then there's nobody to compare and contrast your capability to. And that's both an internal comparison contrasting. It's also external, because then people are looking for, well, if I'm going to go to you in order to buy X, Y, Z, what is your capability over against somebody else's, i.e. your competitor? So we also, as humans, compare and contrast. There's no such thing as just, I'm going to go down to your place always to do this. Yes, we eventually get there because trust has been built. along the way. Yes, I go to my favorite restaurant. And as a matter of fact, what's great about my favorite restaurant that I have not been to for quite a number of weeks is they start telephoning me. Are you okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
okay, okay. We haven't seen you in a while. It's not about the money. They just want to know if I'm okay. And you go, all right, that says a lot about your community around you, right? And you know, this is in itself is fascinating because yes, we could use nice highfalutin words like, well, this is a systemic approach to understanding everything around us. We live in systems. Yeah. We live with people.
Yes.
Okay. And the neighborhoods we live in are clusters, and they're clusters of engagement. All right. You talk about how you buy food, all right? And your approach to that is something I can't do because I live in a big city and I need big places to go to, and I can only do it a little bit at a time. My family is me. Okay. I don't buy huge amounts. I wouldn't know what to do with a freezer load of meat that would, last me for an entire 12 months. First of all, I don't have that kind of freezer. Secondly, I don't want that kind of freezer. And third is I don't eat that much meat, despite the fact I like meat. But there are ways in which we feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, wash ourselves, do all of the ordinary normal things to be part of society, because if we didn't feed ourselves and didn't clothe ourselves and didn't wash ourselves, we can't leave the house.
Norms in society
Yeah,
require it.
yeah. We become kind of disgusting, as a matter of fact. And so on a most everyday basis, we are talking about, that the value of this kind of, what shall we say, relationship building in the most ordinary ways.
And where it can be impactful, and especially in my business, is we use it as a foundation principle for preparedness communications.
Exactly.
So leading up to an event or in a crisis event of some
Right.
time, chaotic, and crisis is individually defined. What could be a crisis for you is absolutely zero impact on me.
Mhm.
And you're seeking information.
Mhm.
Humans seek from trusted sources. It's the same thing for thousands of years.
Yes.
There just happens to be a whole lot more voices
Yes.
present in our lives and easily accessible at this time due
Yes.
to social media and a bunch of other things.
Yes.
So, but you will still turn to whomever you define as a
Yes.
trusted source
Yes.
to seek guidance
Hmm.
or information,
Hmm.
depending on your own risk tolerance, whether you need guidance from somebody or not, or you're just seeking for source information,
Hmm.
you'll go to who's trusted. When I work with municipalities and emergency managers, it's about how do they make themselves, position themselves
Hmm.
as a trusted resource,
Yes.
because trust is in the eye of the beholder,
Yeah.
right? And I keep using the joke, you're not going to be trusted simply because you're standing in front of a microphone with a
Yes.
cute polo and a crest on it, right? That doesn't make you a trusted source of information. That's a positional trust. Yes, there's a
Yes.
small, and I
Yes.
think the latest research is somewhere between 7 or 8% of the population's trust is assigned to position
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
institution. I get it,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That is not the majority of human
No.
beings,
No.
right?
No.
So, how do you do that and set yourself up to be viewed as a trusted source of
Yeah.
information?
Yeah.
That has to occur pre event.
Yeah.
So, building trust is a longitudinal effort. It
Interesting.
is not something we're doing today. It is
Yeah.
something we're doing today, tomorrow, next week,
Yeah.
next month.
Yeah.
And trust is something that has to not only be fostered,
Yeah.
created, and fostered, but it
Yeah.
has to be maintained.
Interesting you say that because often enough we circumscribe, and I think that's a good word for it. It's sometimes with adamantine blinders. we circumscribe trust as positional. So we automatically trust the government. And I'm not saying let's not trust the government. That's not the point. The point is asking ourselves, what's the basis of that trust? What do we expect? What are our expectations? Trust also has an expectation to it. But even beyond that, let's say you are in a position inside of a company as the person who's going to solve all the problems when the proverbial hits the fan. Okay, you're the one to go to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or here in the public domain, we trust the government is going to warn us that, chaos is about to happen, or catastrophe, to make it even worse, because there is already chaos. It's just, that's normative.
Yeah.
It's catastrophe that we really have to worry about. And we trust that someone's going to tell us. All right. And I don't have to do anything until I'm told. It's like evacuation. I'm not going to do anything until I'm told to evacuate, because I don't want to leave the comfort of my own home or the security of my home, or whatever terms we want to use around that. But you hit a point of, let's say, that public person, the public persona, whether it's a bureaucrat or otherwise, government official or otherwise, how do they build trust in the public domain so that people will actually agree with, maybe not agree with, but follow through on what they're being told to do for their own safety?
Mm-hmm. And when we try to tell them, it's about, a lot of times it's about not even knowing they exist. And a prime example is I did another piece of research in Northern Ontario with a community where I spoke to the local emergency manager, and they're like, yeah, we have this great program. We're integrated. We talk to society all the time. And then I went and surveyed the key leadership within sectors of society.
Yes.
They didn't even have a clue that the municipality had an emergency manager, let alone a program. And a lot of this happens in institutions as well. So in the corporate side.
Definitely.
You'll see Canadian Tire here in Canada has an emergency management team, business continuity team, an emergency operations center, and a response network. And I'm using them because they do a very good job of making their corporate family familiar with the fact that this exists, its purpose as residents. But that's not common in the corporate sector.
No. Oh, no.
You'll see these emails flashing across from a business continuity department that you didn't even know your corporation had.
Yes.
And now somebody's telling you to do something and you've never heard of them before. The likelihood that is going to increase your response and adherence to the behavior and guidance provided is really low. So the idea is you build the relation. You have to tell people you exist, why you exist. But one of the key things about building relationships is you have to show value.
Yes.
Okay, I'm there. So what?
Yes.
What's the value that I'm going to add to you? How can I help you right now? And this is the part of evacuation everybody gets wrong, and so does the city of Toronto. Everybody gets it wrong. They need to be helping you right now as to what we want you to do in times of an evacuation.
Yes.
Now is the time to be educating you on what the city would like you to do, not educating you from the point that you're ignorant and you can't figure it out on your own, but from when something happens, this is what the city's going to do. This is how we're going to communicate with you. Number one, most people don't even know what radio or social media channels to go to find the source information. And this needs to be done in the times in advance of events. And none of them do a very good job of it whatsoever, of building that relationship so that when your power goes down and you can't you go immediately to the Twitter handle or the Facebook group or the web page of the certain organization that you've known where to go to, and you get the source information directly. It's right there. and you're given guidance.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because if we wait, and this is why proactive is always better than reactive.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
we wait until it's time to evacuate the city of Toronto, to tell the city of Toronto to evacuate,
Yeah.
you
No.
think TTC days are bad?
No. No. No.
And
Oh,
and oh, by the way, how do you get the 800,000 residents out of the city of Toronto
yeah.
when they don't own cars
Exactly.
and the TTC is not working?
That's right.
How does that work?
That's right. That's right.
So how we answer and address those questions is not something that should be done in the closet darkness,
No. No.
but it's something that should involve people like you,
Yeah.
and they don't.
Yeah. Interesting. Just to pick up on some of the language, because I find it fascinating. Yet you refer to I'm not patronizing. I try not to do this, but actually one of my favorite companies in all of Canada is Canadian
Oh
Tire.
yeah.
And what's interesting is I have no need for Canadian Tire. I don't need a car, so don't need tires or anything about it. I don't have a car. Never owned a car in my life. All right, that's number one. Didn't have to, always lived in cities. There's no reason for me to go into a Canadian Tire to buy tools. Give me a break. I don't even need snowplow. I live in a condo. It's all taken care of. I don't need any of this stuff. And if I need electrical work done, I'll get somebody. I don't do this stuff. I don't need screwdrivers. I do have a set of them, but I don't need them. All right. Even when I renovated, it was a case of I got somebody to come in and do it. Was if you think I'm going to put my father, and I kept saying during this entire process, my father would be rolling in his grave, laughing his ass off if he saw me pick up a hammer and try to
Yeah.
put a nail in the wall. He would just go, don't, stay away, because you're going to knock the wall down. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I think of Canadian Tire, and I have some very good friends in Canadian Tire, very good professionals in Canadian Tire. People, one of our first major chairman, Ray McDonald, was senior VP in Canadian Tire at a time when Canadian Tire was undergoing major business changes. Absolutely fantastic man. He and I have remained friends for decades, absolute decades. And he's that kind of a person who comes off of and out of a context that you refer to, corporate family. It's the human factor in the business that is part and parcel, as a matter of fact, absolutely essential for success.
Mm-hmm.
In the strategic thinking presentations we make, and in the courses that we give, the programs we give, we identify three elements that you need to succeed. One is strategy, one is process, and the other is people. Strategy, and it's often enough we depict it as an inverted triangle, right? At the one end, or the one side at the top, is strategy, which is defined, or we understand as, where do you want to go? Process is, how are you going to get there? And the fulcrum point, the fulcrum, the focal point of success is people. Who's driving the bus? Okay. And if you don't have the right people, to quote Jim Collins in Good to Great in his book, if you don't have the right people with the right skills and the right seats doing the right things, it doesn't matter what your strategy is. It's nonsense. It doesn't matter what your process is. It's just stuff you do. It's the people that are the difference between success or not success, which gets us back to this whole notion of trust. At least in my mind, it does. Some people might think, Victor, how do you always get back to the
How do you circle that back?
Yeah, I always do. This is my academic background. I like tell the story, go all around the universe, and then get to the point.
And then bridge it back. Yeah.
And then, well, I don't know if I bridge it so much as I just throw it up against the wall to see if the spaghetti doesn't fall down. All of this, what we're talking about, is something that is quintessentially cultural. And trust is built as a cultural element, not as an item of intelligence or capability to speak or command or control or even knowing what you're doing. It's about being creating the ability for someone to listen to you in some way, shape, or form so that they can assess and make judgments on their own.
Yes.
That's trust. You may give them whatever guidelines you want. You may tell them how to act, but unless they can incorporate that into the way they think, which is an element of trust based on what you say, which of course is the interchange in trust, the reciprocity, if you will, then it doesn't matter.
It's so much how you frame communications, and I'm not a communications expert. I have a couple of good friends who travel around this country training companies on crisis communications,
Mhm.
and very much framing it in it's far less of me telling you what to do. It's far more effective if I say this is what I would recommend you do, and this is why I think it's a good idea for you to do this.
Mhm.
It's especially now in we the cultural reality that we live in now,
Yeah,
with a reduction in institutional trust.
yeah,
Now we could do
yeah,
7 more conversations on the reasons and the variables
yeah,
that cause the loss of
yeah.
institutional trust, but we have a far lower degree of institutional trust in our main.
Yeah.
So if Public Health Agency of Canada gets to a microphone and tells us to do something, there's a good percentage of the population that just turned the TV off.
Totally.
Recommending actions based upon what we understand and recommending it based upon what they know is a entirely different way to frame that's
Yeah.
culturally sensitive. And culture is one of those interesting topics. And we actually delved into this, and I got into quite a debate with someone over cultural social capital and
Mm.
the fact that different cultures, and I don't just mean ethnic cultures,
No, no.
organizational cultures as well,
Yes,
view individuals through a different lens.
exactly.
And understanding the culture of the organization that you're dealing with
Yes.
is a start point. It's like you traveling to a different part of the world and choosing not to understand the culture where you're
Yep.
going.
Yep.
It doesn't matter how smart you are,
Yes.
how intelligent you put together, how great your presentations
Oh,
are.
no.
If you're a cultural train wreck,
Yeah. Yes.
right?
Yes.
You're done.
Yes.
You're
Oh,
done.
I agree
And
with you
and
100%.
I speak to everybody. It's about, and this draws me back to my military grounding, 28 years in Her Majesty's service.
His Majesty, I'm sorry.
No, I only served Her Majesty.
Oh, excuse me.
I'm very clear about that. We can get into monarchist themes if you want to, but it's about there's a concept in the military called intelligence preparation of the battle space.
Mm.
And it means before we conduct an activity into
Mm.
uh, a physical, geographically delimited location, we want to understand everything there is about that, not just the
Yep.
ground, but the weather, the flows,
Yep.
the
Yep.
transportation, the
Yep.
communication links. But we
Yep.
want to understand the people, norms of life, patterns of life, culture of the individuals there. We need to understand all of that to effectively execute our task with the least amount of resources. That mission is no different than corporate Canada.
Yes.
If you are going to conduct an activity, aka you traveling to a certain part of the world,
Mm-hmm.
you need to understand everything that you possibly can about your target audience. Now,
Mm-hmm.
whether that be a target market avatar that you've
Mm-hmm.
identified to receive your good or service as
Mm-hmm.
a corporation,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's the group you're going to present to,
Mm-hmm.
or whether it's the emergency manager serving a specific population.
Yeah.
If you fail to make the initial effort of truly gathering all the intelligence available
Yes.
about where you're going and
Yes.
whom you're going to do it with, you're setting yourself up for failure, and you may use, in business terminology, an exceptionally greater level of resources
Yeah.
to achieve a similar outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot around that to think about. When we talk about intelligence, going out, doing the research, knowing, a little bit about something, about whatever you want to call it, the audience or what have you, the end user or the end recipient of what it is you're about to say. Um, my suggestion, and maybe it's based, not maybe, it is based on my experience, is really to go beyond just an intelligence capability. It's not just about knowledge. It's also about values. One of the survival techniques, and I'm going to use it, I'm going to put it in those terms, that I have used traveling around the world, right, is to enter into a foreign situation with such a high level of respect, and that's the operative term, respect, for those who live there, whoever they are. And the counterpart of that is a total recognition of what I am incapable of, so that it mitigates any arrogance on my part. Give you an example. A willingness, for example, to be open to the possibility that when you go into a foreign country, you are actually the foreigner. I know it sounds obvious, but I'm fascinated by people who actually travel around the world, always staying with expats, because they know nothing about and are unwilling to take the chance. And it is scary to engage in the local population.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I remember the very first time I went to China, 2004. I know no Chinese. I still to this day have a hard time with languages to begin with. So learning a different language is always difficult. Talking about Chinese, don't even go down there. It's a non-grammatical language that is purely tonal, and I'm almost tone deaf, so let's forget that. It ain't going to work. It's as simple as that. Definitely not going to read the 400 radicals. I'm not going to learn the 400 radicals to go into the basic written Chinese. And that's basic. That's not the other 8 million, radicals and reconnections and reconfigurations. And, having a Canadian friend of mine living in Hong Kong saying, well, it's a picture. See, this means this. And I look at it and going, no, it's a bunch of lines.
Yeah.
It's fine. I'm glad you see the picture. I can't. And I love art, but I can't see the picture in that particular. And what I did the very first time I went to Shanghai was I insisted on staying in a Chinese hotel. People say, are you nuts? Are you absolutely crazy? Well, I said it's within 3 blocks of the office where I'll be spending most of my time. And it's the level of fear that I had to deal with, because now I'm in a place where I can't talk to anybody and they can't talk to me. Right. And it's a reciprocal fear, because they looked at me and went, what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who is this guy and why is he here? Right. And they had to deal with the fundamental value system of people in Asia, if you will, which is don't do anything to disrespect or dishonor the guest. And so they didn't know what to do on how to ensure that I wasn't somehow upset. And I also was in a neighborhood where I couldn't read any of the posters, any of the signs, and I was 3 blocks away from the office. And I was there for about a week. I had the greatest time learning how to live as a foreigner in someone else's backyard.
Yep.
Was it easy? No. I'm the first to admit it. And what it was was respect. Now, how do you generate respect when you can't even talk to anybody? We think of respect as something that's an exchange of ideas or even greetings. Well, a smile goes a long, long way. Gestures. And we in the West have given up on gestures. We don't consider it part of communication, when in reality, it's core to communication.
Very much so.
The way we
Absolutely.
position our face, the way we do this, that, and yeah, and it has nothing to do with whether you can speak a word. It has to do with openness to the possibility that you and this other person can communicate without speaking a word.
Yeah.
And that is a level of respect that is part of the intel. What is that about? It's about the humility of recognizing you don't know everything. And by the way, maybe you shouldn't, because whatever you do end up knowing might actually be more insulting than anything else. But you do have to be aware, hence the intel.
Right. In other words, simple things like when you sit down with certain cultures, don't show them the balls of your feet.
Exactly. In a Buddhist society, you can't show your feet.
Um, little things like many cultures will want to get to know you as a human being
Yes,
before they're interested in commerce.
yes, yes.
Um, and some of my North American friends, and I'll be politically correct about that, want to kick the door down and start talking business. And, and that doesn't work outside of North America,
No, no,
right? And
no, no.
and you're a considerable effort is being done to demonstrate that you are a worthy human being,
Yes,
somebody worthy of building a relationship.
yes, yeah,
Then we'll worry about whether you can fulfill my commerce needs or not.
exactly.
After I've confirmed that
Yes,
you're the type of human I want to deal with.
yes, yes,
And we lose the cultural
yeah,
aspect of
yeah,
so many of the interactions that we undertake
exactly.
because we see them as simply an exchange of goods and service for
Right.
remuneration,
Yep.
compensation,
Right.
and off we go.
Yeah. It's a buy and sell world, and you're going to
Yeah.
buy what it is, or I'm going to buy what it is. And you just go, wait a minute, stop. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's great about, again, my example of the Chinese, I had gone to China for 14 years, sometimes 3, 4 times a year, often enough, 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And recognizing it, by the time I got to the third week, I had to go home. Uh, that's another thing you have to recognize is, what are your limits?
Yep.
I had to go home. I cannot continue staying here. I have to go home in order to renew myself in my own culture so that I can come back. That it's recognizing your own limits. This
And
is
that's part of that. That's why communities are so popular
yeah,
overseas is that
yeah,
somebody,
yeah,
well, until recently, Dubai was one of the top locations for zero tax countries for
yes,
people who wanted to start companies. So they would move there. But when they move there, well, Dubai is probably a bad example because 80% of the people are expats in the city.
yeah,
Very only 20% or less are actually originally from the Emirates. But
mhm,
and I think Abu Dhabi is the same way. But
yes,
um, the point being is that we need that cultural grounding in what's familiar to us
yeah,
and why you need to check. And a family friend of mine, he him and his wife were career humanitarian workers, and
mm,
they met at some location in Africa, and they got married, and they raised a bunch of kids, and the kids are Canadian because they're Canadian.
mhm,
And about once every 4 to 5 years, they would
mhm,
return to Canada for a year.
yeah, yeah,
And this was one to catch up on some healthcare things that they
yes,
needed to do, but more of it was to bring the kids back and ground them into a Canadian cultural
yeah,
identity and a
yeah,
Canadian cultural mosaic,
yeah,
and to bring them back. And I think that's the same whenever we go anywhere where we seek out interesting, innovative ideas, but at a certain point, we're like, I'd kind of like to be with what I'm familiar with.
exactly.
And this is organizationally the same too, which
Yep.
I argue why in operations management, cultural change is such a slow
Oh,
moving
yes.
morphosis.
Yes.
And
Yes.
people demand cultural change on a
Yeah.
dime. It's
Yeah.
like
No.
if you're demanding the culture to change on a dime,
No.
then you don't understand
No.
culture
No.
because it
I
can't
agree.
happen. We
I
saw
agree.
this with the military and everybody storming through the front door instructing that an institution built off 250 years of British influence is all of a sudden going to um, change its culture in 3 years because you're in charge.
No. No. No.
No, no,
No.
not at all. In fact, the culture will outweigh you.
Exactly. You will. That's an automatic. That's a kiss of failure. I mean, that's it.
Oh,
You can't do it. First of all, you don't understand what the culture is.
yeah,
That's number one.
yeah,
Number two, there's nothing annoys me more to walk into a company where, the so-called bosses, and they are bosses, they're not so-called, are being Mr. and Mrs. Nice Guy. I'm your friend. Oh, screw that crap. I don't want you as my friend. I want you as my boss. I want you to back me up. I want you to listen to me. I want you to guide me. I want us together to get the work done, but I ain't your friend.
yep.
Okay. We have friendship in the business, but outside, I have my own friends. I have my own family. Don't give me this, oh, we're going to have the great Christmas party. I don't want the great Christmas party. Just leave me alone. I want to
Yeah,
go home at the end of
yeah.
the day. And this is actually one of the struggles I have because I spend a lot of time doing work here in my home office, and that's where I am today. And it's not having the separation that is also part of an issue. You're not separating. I'm not separating.
And you know what? I think just to jump on that, because I think that's huge. And I think that leads into the changing culture we have with the remote work ideology, that
Yes,
idea
yes.
that's come in because, and I think there's so much ground to be made up here. I mean, especially in Canada, the federal government's saying they're going to make workers go back 3 days a week instead of 2 to 3, but fix it at 3. But the point being, now imagine if you lived in a condo building in Toronto
I
and
do.
there's a co-work space in the building.
Oh, yeah,
Okay. A
yeah,
co-work space
yeah, yeah, yeah,
with a couple of those private rooms. You know what I
yes,
mean? Those
yeah, yeah,
soundproof rooms to take
yep,
important calls,
yep,
but
yep,
a co-work space built into the condo environment.
yep,
So people who work from home actually can go to work
yes.
because that, again, I'm in a home office in my basement. I
Mhm.
I am not far from a whole bunch of distractions to take me
Oh,
away from what I want it, what I should be, what I need to be doing.
yes,
And
yes,
so the idea is when the culture moves to more remote work for
yeah,
things that can be done remotely,
yeah,
then the organizational setup of society needs to move on. I often said at the beginning of the pandemic, how I will know that this is permanent is when new construction stops calling it a den and starts calling it a home office.
home office. Yeah,
When new condo construction
yeah,
is 1 plus home office, not
yeah,
1 plus den.
yeah,
When townhouses are being built with specific dedicated spaces
yep,
called offices with natural light and
yep,
all the different,
yep,
they're not the back corner by the front
yep,
door of the
yep,
condo, but
yep,
they're actually in a reasonably prominent place.
yep,
When
yep.
we start to see that, you notice the change. But I think the idea of, again, as an opportunity, imagine if you went into a condo building, bought a condo, and turned it into common space and
Mm,
turn it into a remote work institution
yes,
where you put seven
yes,
or eight desks in there and you charged a membership. I mean,
yeah,
Ottawa's booming with the
yeah,
uh at the group workspaces. We
yeah,
work, I know, didn't work out very well,
yeah, yeah,
but there's a number of these
yeah,
spaces where you can go in and say, okay, it's $25 for a day. I
yeah,
need this project done.
yeah,
I need to get away from distractions,
yeah,
etc.
yeah,
I just think there's so much advantage
yes,
when you're able to navigate culture.
yes. 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 And for me, it starts by recognizing the cultural imperative. Well, we're talking about cultural capital, social capital. While there is huge value there, we use that term sometimes loosely, value. We have to start recognizing, well, what is the value here? What do we understand by value? I mean, I don't want to nitpick tiny words here, except that I deliver entire sessions on value. Uh,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm not shy about that. It's a case of us, this is linked to preparedness. It's a case of us recognizing we live in context, social or otherwise, that's social, but at the same time, that entails responsibility. Just because we live in a social context doesn't mean we just surrender to whatever the social situation is.
Yeah.
There's a whole contextuality to this, to use a terrible term. It's a context. I have neighbors. You have neighbors. There are some of my neighbors I trust. There are some of my neighbors I don't even want to talk to. Perfectly legitimate.
Yep.
I better rephrase that. I do talk to them, but it's a hello and goodbye. Others, especially
Pleasantries.
yes, it's pleasantries. It's the acceptable norm on an everyday basis. It's not throwing bricks at them. Okay, to put it in a different way. Do I like them? I tolerate them. And there's a whole spectrum of cultural engagement, from those whom we tolerate to those whom we want to be with and associate with, hang out with, to put it in those 1960s, 1970s term.
Yeah.
I don't know what they use nowadays. I'm too old for whatever the new lingo is. But but you know, that also is part of culture, because once again, I get to the organizational structure. There are those at the C level, and there are those at the front line, and there are the supervisors and the managers and the directors and the executives and so on and so forth, each of whom has a place. That whether you put that into military terms or into corporate terms, corporations, military have structures. That's how they work. I mean, we're not about to say let's all be equal. No, but let's all be respected. Ah, that's a cultural difference. It's
Yeah.
not
And it's,
about being equal. It's about respecting each other in terms of what the other person and other groups are capable of, not just being trusted because they're not going to steal from me. It's being trusted because I somewhat have a codependence on them in order to be successful to begin with.
in the best framework that I use to describe that is the healthcare system.
Yeah.
Because we often think that doctors are at the hierarchical top of a healthcare system, but a doctor can't do a nurse's job.
No.
And if you've ever been in a hospital, I worked in a hospital for 2.5 years. The nurses run the place.
Yes.
They are absolutely in charge of the organization and the execution and the processes within the hospital.
Yes.
Yes, the trauma surgeon has a certain set of skills they
Yes.
don't,
Yes.
but the trauma surgeon is useless on his own.
Yes.
He requires, or she requires, a whole series of team members around them.
Yes.
So your laboratory tech, your x-ray technician, your MRI technician, it's a team environment, and they build a culture of cooperation.
Yes.
And in the military, where they really take this is the special operations forces, the assaulters, the people who do the really tough, very dangerous work. They live in a world where everybody gets called by their first name,
Yep.
irrespective of rank.
Yep. Yes.
Right? The general gets called by, well, probably not the general, but everybody in the organization gets called by their first name.
Yeah.
Because if you're here, you couldn't have gotten here unless you were an absolute expert in your field. You wouldn't have made it through the gate. Now that you're in the culture and the community, when you speak about your area of interest in your area of expertise, we believe you and we trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're here, and the healthcare industry works that way. The
Yeah.
doctor doesn't trust the nurse, doesn't distrust the nurse,
No.
doesn't second question the nurse. The x-ray technician doesn't second guess, oh, you know, the doctor said you needed this, but I actually think it's this set
No.
over here,
Yeah.
so we're going to
Yeah.
go do. No,
Yeah. No.
they work in tandem
Yeah. Yeah.
together,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
it works out exceptionally well because of how their culture is built. And the several organizations,
Yep. Yep.
and I call it a higher degree of um cultural intelligence, cultural
Yes.
knowledge,
Yes.
cultural
Yes.
skills. You can
Yes.
use whatever
Yeah. Yeah.
descriptor you
Oh, yeah.
want, but
Yeah. Yeah.
some maturity. That's the one I was looking
Yeah.
for. A
Yeah.
higher level of cultural maturity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those organizations function really well.
Yeah.
And to circle it back,
Mm-hmm.
they have strong social capital.
Totally. Totally. You and I, next time or another session, we could probably talk about our experiences working in a hospital, because I worked in a hospital as well when in previous life. I won't get into details now, but this goes back many decades ago, way before the Logistics Institute. Actually, it was in the 70s. And Sick Children's Hospital of all places. Not a place I wanted to be in, but a place I was assigned to for different reasons.
Yeah.
And it was part of a professional development program that was a semester long, because I was doing a degree. And the head person that we reported to at the hospital thought I was competent and capable of enough to be able to replace him during his summer vacation time. So I actually worked at the hospital for longer than just the required, course demand. And I learned many things. First, children have a great way of teaching you what is real and what is not. And the most fanciful ways of dealing with things, and the most creative, maybe it's not fanciful, it's the wrong term, the most creativity comes out of children. And we adults lose that. And a sick child, however debilitated, and I was assigned to certain wards that I won't talk about, no matter how debilitated, have this ability to embrace life in ways that we as adults whine about.
Oh, yeah.
They don't whine, they just live. But the most impressive group that I ran into were the nurses.
Yeah.
They were, and I actually was assigned on various occasions during the weeks on emergency. Now, we won't go down to what that's
Those stories, yeah.
those stories, but there are stories. And what I loved about it, and this is pre everything is on computer days, so we are talking about the 70s here. And there would be this great big whiteboard in emergency. And you know that this team is replacing that team because the schedule is such that. And what did the head nurse do? This person, they had a grid where they identified every single patient, every single room, every single diagnosis, all done, handwritten. And that was the transition from one team to the other. It was simplest of communications, but the most meaningful thing that I ever witnessed was.
And you know what? We still do it. The hospital I worked in 2015, exactly that same way, listed on whiteboards.
Yep.
And the reason being is whiteboards don't lose power. They're not subject to cyber attacks.
Yep.
And they speak if I can't. So if I'm in charge and I'm not available to do a proper handover with the incoming nursing officer.
Exactly.
I I mean, handovers are great when both of you are there, but I don't need to be there
No,
because the whiteboard is there.
that's right.
And it's a very, and I, to this day, I mean, I'm pointing right there, but that's my whiteboard. I'm
Yeah.
a massive fan. And
Yes.
when I was finishing my PhD a couple of years ago, I would go on OC Transpo holding on to a 3 by 4 foot whiteboard
Oh,
because I am a visual thinker.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would put it up in my
Yeah.
office at the university
Yeah.
with my one marker that I stuffed in my backpack,
Yeah.
and I would sit there and figure
Yeah.
my way
Yeah.
through a whole series of
Yeah.
issues
Yeah. Yeah.
on a whiteboard.
Yeah.
And when I came to a brilliant conclusion, I would hold up my camera on the phone, take a
Yes.
picture of it, and erase it, and get back on the bus
Yes.
and go home.
Yes. Yeah. And it's interesting, there's an age or generation difference going on here. When I was preparing for my doctoral exams in at Mac, I had to do a minor and a major, and the minor was in classical Chinese thought. The major was in something else, which was the basis of the thesis. But the classical Chinese thought was so foreign to me. Everything I read everything in English, so obviously I already talked about not being
Your 400
not
characters.
being able to read to 400 character arrangements. And I remember sitting, and I was given the opportunity to use an unused classroom to prepare for things, do my readings and so on and so forth. And it was the chalkboard that was my salvation. I love chalkboards. I took Confucian and Taoist thinking, two totally different pillars of thought in terms of what some would say Plato and Aristotle, or actually Plato and more or less the Stoics in approach to comparable. And I actually mapped out all of my thoughts on a great big blackboard. I didn't have a cell phone at the time. I was a poor graduate student. Didn't have a cell phone, so I couldn't take a picture, but that was the basis of my walking in to take my exam because it was in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I still say to this day, when we do a leadership program and we have a group of people, visualize. And with the team, when we have our team meetings on Tuesdays, put it up on there. Visualize. Now, with the team, and they're going to hear this, so they're still too word oriented. So when they start they just write and write and write and write. And I say, diagram it. Okay.
Yeah.
Circles, lines. How is this related to that? It's about connectivity. Those are the important pieces. So now we get into social capital again. I know I keep going back to the theme, no matter how far away I get from it. And that is by visualizing something, not simply by writing the words up, but visualizing something in silly doodling. That's an element that we bring to one of our leadership programs. Doodling. By doodling, you'll see that this circle actually might relate to that circle. And those are two concepts that have connectivity that maybe, or realities that have connectivity that maybe we should explore.
Yep.
Right. And that is a way of strategic thinking. People think of strategic thinking as let's go and build a strategy that's 800 pages long. No, strategic thinking is being able to take a very complex issue that we're facing and to begin to break it down into all of its edible parts. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And as you break it up, you identify the social, economic, organizational, cultural issues. You may not use that language, but that is actually what you're doing.
Yeah. And I use it a lot in when I do mentoring with individuals who are adopting a prepared life. And I kind of look at it, and I know project management calls it the path of least resistance or backward thinking. I'm still to this day searching for the formal, appropriate operations management, organizational strategy way of thinking, but defining your end state first
Yes.
and then working the process back to your current
Yes.
state. And
Yes.
and the thought process is that, and when I work with people, I said, okay, think about your world in 5 areas of your physical, financial, and mental health, your personal relationships, and your professionalism. Where do you want to be?
Yeah.
Come up with a strategy. This
Yep.
is what I want to be,
Yep.
realistically, 1, 3, 5, 10 year strategies,
Yep.
whatever timeline you pick. And then
Yep.
you walk that back to where you are.
Yep.
And then you gatekeep that with a whole bunch of little deliverables along the way. So you're eating the elephant in
Mm-hmm.
chunks.
Mm-hmm.
And then we train people to then take those chunks and turn them into calendar appointments.
Yes.
And once they're calendar appointments, then you don't have to think anymore. All you have to do is do what's in your calendar and you'll achieve all of your goals. And
Yes.
it's transitioning that kind of thinking to people to
Yes.
say that the everything is achievable, or at least the opportunity to pursue it is achievable. Because okay, we all want to be Prime Minister of Canada. That's not going to happen. I'm not sure if it's on your to-do list next year, but it's not on mine. But there's probably more than one person that wants the job, and only one person can get the job,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everybody develops their own roadmap.
Yeah.
And when you develop your roadmap,
Yeah.
you are far more likely to follow it than if you download a roadmap that's on a PDF that somebody provides for you.
Yeah.
Why are you executing somebody else's actions when
Yeah.
you want your outcome?
Yep. Yep. Yes.
Right? It's part of
Yes.
it is like, you know, if you want a different outcome than what everybody else has right now, then you need to be doing things differently than everybody else is.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. Well, two things, totally unrelated. Why would I, be logical when I,
No, no, don't.
throw things up at the air, up in the air? I never wanted to be prime minister, but I would love to have been governor general.
Yeah.
I think that has got to be one of the coolest things you could possibly ever do. Uh,
The the dignitary position, the
oh,
honorary position.
being, everything about it. And there's a part of me that actually I never got close to it. I never met the governor general, except that I met one of the former governor general's wives, Roland Michener's wife, the Honorable Mrs. Michener. She was a delightful, delightful lady. This way back in my she was such a nice person and humble and everything you could think about somebody who what I consider typical, expression from the Bronx, somebody with class.
Yeah.
They don't have to show it. They just have to be it.
Yeah.
Without any pretension at all. And I thought, wow, around that time I was doing my, doctoral work at the University of Toronto. I was teaching, and I thought, wow, wouldn't that be incredible to become the governor general? Now, there are several reasons why I couldn't and wouldn't be able to, not the least being is that I'm not bilingual. So it's not going to happen, but that was one of my, not prime minister, too much heat, too much, that's painful. But to be the governor general representing Canada around the world, wow,
I
that's
often said that
incredible.
I would take the role of the chief of staff. I want the one holding the BlackBerry, not the one holding the microphone.
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
Because that's the person who gets things done. The
Yeah,
politician gets nothing done. The chief of
no,
staff gets
yeah,
everything
yeah,
done.
yeah, yeah. Going back to what you were just talking about, one of my earliest mentors when the Logistics Institute started, George Kuhn. George, he and his wife and I became really good friends before, unfortunately, both of them died. Swiss German. I always referred to George. He was the president of Danzas Canada. major international freight forwarding company. And George, knowing George was like being in an opera. He was so operatic. There was nothing small about George. When he got angry, the world exploded. He was Swiss German. You'd think he'd be one of these nice, quiet, what I call little Swiss people who don't make waves because they're all neutral. No, there was nothing neutral about George. He was, in your face if he needed to be. And he was the one who introduced me to this concept, critical path. And I thought, what the hell is a critical path? Not knowing that I had been doing it all along anyway, when you write a thesis, is where do you want to be? Just to describe what you just said. What is your end goal? Where do you want to be at the end? What is your vision of what it looks like? Now, from there, start stepping back.
Mm-hmm.
That's your critical path. Then after you get that step, then you step back again. Then you step back again, and you step back again until you get to what you consider the beginning. And then you reverse it and move towards the goal.
Yeah. And then so what you're working towards is, for example, somebody who wants to lose 50 pounds. Losing 50 pounds is hard. Losing 10 pounds is a reasonable, achievable goal.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do that 5 times.
Yes.
Right. And when I ran my last half marathon, which was a few years ago, I said, I don't have a half marathon to do. I have 7 3-kilometer races.
Yes.
Because of how they position the water stands every 3 kilometers.
Yes.
So I have to do this 3-kilometer race 7 times and I'm finished.
Yes.
So what I would do is I would run a really solid 3 kilometers and I would walk the water station at a very slow pace for a good 2 minutes.
Yes.
Ending one race, starting another race.
Exactly.
It wasn't a break in the race. It was ending one and starting another one.
Yes.
And by doing that, I was able to achieve the best time I had ever done in a race because I turned it into edible chunks. And the critical path is exactly what we try to help people realize in and organizations as well. How do I become a global leader in my industry? I hear that all the time, right? And yet I'm sure you do too as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to spend the first days trying to figure out what this person means by global leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But before we can prescribe any pathway, what the heck do you mean by global leader?
Exactly.
Is that a 22.5% market share in 3 different regions? Like, what is a global leader?
Exactly.
You want people to pick you in a survey 60 times out of 100? Like, what are you talking about? Because the world's, especially politicians, are full of these wonderfully packaged phrases that mean absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
But get everybody twisted in their shorts about what's going on. And so I often say, okay, like, what are you actually trying to achieve? Like, it's like what you said earlier, to circle back, about I don't want to kill my competitor because my competitor is necessary, but I want to chew part of their market share.
Precisely.
Right? So I might have 40% of the market share.
Oh, yeah.
For me, global leader is 60%.
Yep.
The market isn't creating an additional 20.
No.
I'm going to get 20% from my competitors.
Michael Porter said that competitive advantage is built, just from a business point of view, is built on 2 things: cost and differentiation. Those are his words. And what's interesting about that is both are internal in terms of how you become competitive. It's not about shooting your rival.
No.
Right? They're not the enemy. The enemy is not being able to control your costs in terms of how you deliver value in the marketplace. It's the wastefulness of your internal operations. And so what he says the key is to control your costs. That's the cost side. And that actually builds your margins.
Yeah.
Because everybody's got costs. You cannot eliminate those costs, but you have to control them. Right? Yet at the same time, you have to create value and you have to deliver value. So there are going to be costs involved. Often enough, logistics is a critical cost in that. And logistics being really synonymous with transport or delivery or distribution. The other is differentiation. And he said, this is actually a critical piece. What makes you different from your competitor? Now, there's a whole range of what constitutes differentiation. Everything from, well, product differentiation. Well, it's Nike versus a sneaker, Converse.
Yeah.
I'm giving my age away by calling it, although Converse sneakers are coming back.
They are. They
Yeah,
are. My
yeah,
son
very
wore
much
his at
so.
the wedding.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's, what comes around goes around, what goes around comes around. There it is.
Mhm.
Boom. And we're back now to Converse. So, to watch people in downtown Shanghai wait 5, 6, 10 hours at the Nike store in order to get Michael Jordans and to buy more than one at what would be a very expensive cost in China in order to sell it online at an increased
It's the
cost.
cost. Yeah.
Is kind of obvious, but it's a Nike and it's a Michael Jordan, and in certain cultures, brand is more important than usefulness or utility. It's about the name.
Oh,
So,
by far. And this goes back to what you said before about value,
oh,
of how
totally.
I don't assign the value. The market
No.
assigns the
Oh, yeah.
value of that product.
Exactly. So in that differentiation, what often enough people look at is what's the product and what makes my product different? Is it a BlackBerry? Well, we don't even talk about BlackBerries anymore. Is it an iPhone? Is it a Samsung? Is it a whatever? And what's the benefit of this versus that? And therefore the product. What Porter and others go on to say is actually no, it's your culture that is your differentiation.
Yep.
It's again looking at internal, external culture. It's how you organize, how you actually accomplish things, and it's not. It's your brand value that's based on value that is perceived in the market, not value that you think it is. All right. And it actually is your people. It's your history, your people. All organizations have history. So we go back to the idea you introduced about, how do we change the military culture? Well, how about starting with the 150 to 250 years that are the culture and build from there rather than introduce change? Change for the sake of change is not a cultural norm. It's actually abnormal.
Yes, but it happens to always be the prescription that's brought
Oh,
with new leadership is
totally,
I need to leave my mark on the
totally.
organization. And so here
Yeah,
I go. But
yeah,
differentiation is everything. And this is one of the things that I even talk about in the program that I'm developing for emergency managers is you need to separate yourself from the city. You need to separate yourself from the politicians, and you need
yes,
to be a distinct, unique
yes,
institution within government that provides a unique service. You need
yes,
to differentiate yourself because when people are cheesed off at the police
yes,
for various reasons, public works and bylaw, you need to bring yourself outside to the point where your crest should not be the city of Ottawa's crest. You should have a distinct crest
yes,
and branding for you so that your reputation management is not tied
yeah,
to the impression or the belief or the state of
yes,
work, especially not the politician side.
exactly.
And
exactly.
this is why what
Eh,
politician loves more in the US, because the US is all about brand identity, is
Yes.
when they show up and FEMA gives them one of those jackets with their name
Oh,
written on the
yeah,
side,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
With the FEMA crest,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
president on one side and the name on it.
yeah,
And he
yeah, yeah.
throws the jacket on like
Yeah,
I believe that unique brand identity, differentiated
yeah,
identity is incredibly important
yeah,
for it's the same that I use in my company, and it's the same you use in the Logistics Institute. You differentiate yourself and try to do something that nobody else is doing.
that's right. That's right.
Otherwise, you're just seen as a competitor.
Yes. Yes. And you know, part of that is, and I know this is not gonna sit well for a number of people, but I have said in the 30 to 40 years I've been at the helm of the Institute that we actually don't have competitors.
Yeah.
I mean, this is actually, you know, I said that years and years, decades ago. And I find it fascinating that someone like Jeff Bezos at Amazon actually is that's the philosophy behind Amazon. And he actually says this, and I quote him on occasion that don't be competitive minded, be customer minded.
Yeah.
It's what value are you delivering to your customer? Who cares what your competitors are doing? Because the differentiator is what I'm thinking of the person who's involved with the emergency situation in any municipality or any organization. What value do you represent to people so that they trust you?
Yeah.
Right? Are you going to help them save their lives? Put it into an extreme situation. Can they trust that if they listen to you, they will be not better off, but they will still be alive and their family will be safe, and that they will be able to start another day even after the catastrophe. But it starts with, do they trust you?
Yeah.
Because if you tell them to go do X, Y, Z, what the hell does that mean? Doesn't mean a thing if they don't trust you.
Right. And trust and basis in institutions is important. So it's the same as when you create value, you have to create obviously value in the customer's perspective, because otherwise who
Yeah,
cares what you think your product is or
yeah,
what you think you
exactly.
do, right?
Yeah,
Your customer will decide whether you create value or not, and
that's
whether
right.
you create it in a culturally sensitive framework that
Yep.
works for them,
Hmm.
and that you deliver
Hmm.
on what you've promised, which creates trust.
Yes.
um yeah, then you don't have a competitor. You
Yes.
just don't, because other organizations aren't doing that. It's not only that you do something that nobody else does, you do something in a way that nobody else does it. So the
Yeah.
customer's like, yeah, I create an offer so good that people feel stupid not giving you their money. That's basic marketing, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But to do that, you have to solve a real problem
Yes.
that people have. You have to do it in a way that they find useful. That's the least amount of effort for them. You have to be credible and trustworthy, have some type of social proof, and you have to present a low or zero risk offer to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not hard.
No. No. You know, there's an acronym in social media for that. Have you ever heard of FOMO?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Fear of missing out.
Oh, yeah.
And so as a customer, I got to buy this. Because if I
Urgency and
don't,
scarcity.
yeah.
There's only 100 spots,
Oh, got to
and
do
it's
it.
only available till the end of June.
That's it. Boom. FOMO. Fear
Once
of
the
missing
100
out.
are gone, there will be no more.
That's right. That's right. You know, one of the challenges, and maybe this is something we could talk about at some other time and really dive into. You were talking about emergency managers, people with positions, potentially titles. The business continuity officer, the BCO, or whatever they acronym they want to use. The person in the organization who is going to lead the recovery. We'll just use that term. Um, the key here that I always find I struggle with is you have a person in a position who needs to build trust and respect by giving trust and respect, but at the same time has to deal with crisis. Now, you and I both know that while we live at a very strange time and exogenous situations can occur anytime.
They abound.
Dubai gets the most incredible rainstorm in the first in 75 years. All right. And we are talking about a place that has no understanding of what rain is.
Yeah.
All right. We're talking about generations of people who have lived in this city who wouldn't know what rain is.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like some of our colleagues who come in from, say, Africa. All right. And they are moving, being located, are locating, and so on and so forth. And for almost to the person that I've spoken to, and we have a colleague that we both met, they tend to come in January. And I look at them and I go, why did you choose January? You come from a land where 50 degrees is normative, and you arrive in January and minus 30
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
normative. Like what the hell were you thinking? And often enough, it's not about choosing, it's about that's when I was told to arrive.
Yeah. That's when the opportunity presented itself and I seized it.
And that's it. I have no other, because if I say no, I'll never get this opportunity again.
Right. Right.
But we're dealing with, we're talking to you, or talking more than I am, to emergency managers. I've worked with some people in the emergency relief world, international, Doctors Without Borders, Red Cross, Red Crescent groups. Really close friend of mine was the director of distribution for all of Latin America for the Red Cross. And so he and I have these conversations. Where does preparedness come in for someone who's got a position in an organization where hopefully nothing actually happens?
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we don't have to discuss this now, but to me, that is looking at it from the point of view of being potentially that person. How do we handle that? How do I, as that person in that position with that responsibility, make it real for somebody? And most of us assume that it's never going to happen.
We teach socializing organizational risk. So from a very simplistic perspective, it's the individual running the warehouse didn't think at the Dollar Tree down in Oklahoma that he'd lose the entire national distribution center to a tornado.
Right.
That person probably did think it was possible because he was in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
The person sitting in Utah
No.
did not have that on their distribution map or the
No.
potential outcomes and the risk. And this is why as we call it, the day job of people in that business is socializing institutional risk and putting it on the radar of individuals. So saying you run the Western American distribution network, we need you to understand the risk profile that the corporation organizationally is exposed to, and how, while it may not impact you directly, it will impact the task that you're charged with executing. And so, for example, I don't know what Dollar Tree is intending to do now that they've lost their national, or one of their national distribution warehouses to a tornado. And there are people in those fields, and Walmart is literally the best in the United States when it comes to managing emergency management and distribution. That's a reality that needs to be socialized. And again, when I socialize organizational risk, what do I achieve? I achieve familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
I achieve people realizing the fact that I exist in your organization.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here. I extend the reach of my social capital,
Mm-hmm.
not by telling you that when emergencies happen, you'll see instructions from me,
Mm-hmm.
but socializing organizational risk and cultural risk, which is another thing that's important to organizations as well. And by doing that, I build the social capital. So the strange guy in the corner that worries about the big bad day, that looks like he's just ready, his hair's on fire all the time. I've actually met that individual 3 or 4 times over the course of a year.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And then when they show up on a Zoom call like this,
yeah,
now taking a leadership position,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not an unfamiliar face.
You know, we all live and work inside of our comfort zones. Now, part of the comfort zone is working with and out of assumptions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And part of the assumptions that we embrace are to prevent us. Actually, it's a fear response. We don't want to deal with fear. We want to cocoon ourselves against fear, personal fear or otherwise. You know, the whole understanding of an assumption is that we actually judge somebody else from within our own experience. And so that's the problem with an assumption, is that we're pointing to others based on what we experience and say they don't come up to our standard, especially if it's a negative assumption. Sometimes positive assumptions are also the same. They don't come up to our standard, but maybe I'll be open enough to allow that and accept it, if not embrace it. I mean, humans are so damn complicated. It's just like, and not complex. I wish I could just say we're all complex. We are, but
For complicated, simple beings.
we're so damn complicated sometimes that, you know, within the comfort zone, and maybe this is something we could end on. Within the comfort zone, it's difficult for us to accept the what if scenario.
Yes, very much.
All right, because we actually guard against the what if.
Yes.
We, you know, to quote the movie, we can't handle too much truth. We can't
And
handle the truth.
and we know we are unsuccessful when we tell people the severity and the probability and the outcomes. When we try to communicate the what if by saying to people, you could lose it all and
Yeah,
it might all be destroyed,
yeah,
you turn on apathy, you turn on avoidance, you turn on
totally,
all of these natural.
totally.
So when we want to worry about, when we want to talk about the what ifs, we can't talk about the apocalyptic ending
No, no, no,
because it never works, whether it's an
no,
organizational meeting
no.
or
Yeah,
whether it's because, like we've said before, if I stand up in an organizational meeting and talk about the apocalyptic loss of our main distribution center,
yeah,
I'll be shut down by the C-suite. I'll be told that's an operational process
yes,
and you've
yeah,
got the wrong audience.
yes, yes. Don't talk to us about that stuff. That's somebody else's issue.
When I talk about the Tylenol problem and the
Yes,
Tylenol solution to a very important event that happened to that company and how they were utterly successful in dealing with it. When I talk about the what if scenario, I talk about institutional risk, the risk to the institution, the
yeah,
reputational, whatever it may be.
yeah. Whatever,
Right.
however you define it. Yeah,
And so you have, and this is again, if we want to end on it, this talks to the cultural
yes,
identity of what's important to the room I'm speaking to
yes, yes,
is how I'm going to
yes,
contextually
yes,
phrase the what if scenario.
yes,
So if
yeah,
I'm talking to the C suite, I'm not talking about last mile logistics and
No,
operations
no, no, no,
management.
no, no,
Wrong
no,
audience.
no, no.
Wrong audience. They're not concerned. Out the door I go.
Yeah,
I'm talking about institutional risk
yes, yes,
and the social license to operate.
yes,
I'm talking about the trust that we have with the
yeah,
population we serve.
yes,
But when I'm in the operations meeting talking about the big bad day,
yes,
I'm
yes,
talking about how do we redistribute product.
yep, yep,
I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to tell you, you need to know how to
yeah,
do that now.
exactly, exactly.
But that's about understanding the culture of the group
Yep,
in which you're talking. And again, this is a skill when you understand humans and social capital and
yep,
relationships,
yep, yep,
how somebody can be that much more influential
yes.
by just understanding the audience.
Yes. Interesting. Just to bring this to some closure, one is you just used the word influential. In this world of social media, we talk about influencers. I still don't understand what that means, but that's a different issue. I'm old. Nonetheless, our take at the Logistics Institute on a leader. A leader is not about position or title or anything like that. It's actually about the ability to influence others. Right? And I find that when I thought about that and I did my research or whatever around that, I thought that has got to be one of the most powerful things that a leader can be, is to influence others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to end with 3 quotes, 4 potentially. One, and it's all within the context of, and I'm reading off of a slide that I'm using when I'm in Jordan at the end of the month. If it could happen, it will happen. We all know that if it could happen, it will happen. So, and here are some quotes that I pulled out that I'm going to throw at the Jordanians. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's law number 1. Law number 5 or 6 is if there is a possibility of several things going wrong, the one that will cause the most damage will actually be the one that goes wrong. Next one. If everything seems to be going well, you've obviously overlooked something.
That's so true.
It says everything. Hey, that tomato sauce that I'm making for the pasta is just so wonderful until I taste it and go, you forgot the salt, idiot. And it's too late to put it in. Last one. The more unworkable a plan is, the greater the probability of implementation.
Yeah,
The more
that's true.
out there you can be in how you think about what you can do, the more probable it will be successful.
All of that is absolutely true. And if you work in an industry, what is the worst thing that could happen in your industry? And then what is your plan for that?
Yes.
So if you're in the oil industry, oil distribution industry, what's your plan for when you have a spill?
Exactly. Exactly. Right. And you know what? It isn't if you have a spill.
No,
It's when.
when.
Because the probability of that happening is probably more real than you're willing to admit.
Yep.
As always, Jeff, a delight.
Yes, an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. We'll plan the next one.